everyone. Thank you so much for joining and kind of being here in person. It's nice to see a lot of people here, a lot of you that I already know, so that's very good. Glad to be here. I have a lot of slides to go through, so we'll just kind of dive into it straight away. So first of all, I will be talking about an incident that I did last year where we were basically chasing, well, not chasing, but investigating a nation-state threat actor in an environment. It's not going to be your typical kind of presentation where I say, okay, this is the beginning, this is how it happened, this is how they got in, this is the middle, this is the end. So basically giving the story from the beginning to end. It'll be the way that we have actually investigated this and how we were finding things throughout the engagement. So let's dive in. A bit about me if you don't know me. So my name is Vladimir Ožura. I have 18 years of experience in IT, the last 10 in security, currently employed as a principal security researcher in the detection and response team in Microsoft. Doing investigation leads, so basically leading investigations within Microsoft Dart and a threat hunter. And I do have a couple of certs as well. So as it usually is, when there is an incident, you basically just dive into the incident. You are pulled into a call with a customer, and then the customer starts telling you, oh, this is what we found, this is what we have, so why would it be any different in here? So let's dive into it. First thing, the customer, when we got to this engagement, when we started it, the customer told us about that they got a notification from their SOC about some malicious traffic that's coming from a SQL server. They already had a third party engaged, so another incident response firm that was engaged for 2 weeks, and they already did an investigation, found a lot of good things. One of the things they found was that high privileged accounts were used for RDP, basically lateral movement using RDP. There was ngrok tunneling software that was used from a SQL server, so hence the notification from the SOC that they got. Third thing they found was web shells on internet exposed web servers, and this was believed to be the initial access method, which you will see throughout the presentation that obviously it wasn't. So the fourth thing, so two domain controllers or two DLLs were found on two domain controllers that were used to register, that were registered to capture password changes. So this is how the threat actor was basically doing credential theft. And then they were attributing this attack to APT34. So that's kind of the 5 things we were given. The good thing is the customer had an EDR solution deployed with 6 months of retention, which is very good. It's not very often that we see customers with EDR solutions. So when we enter an engagement, it's usually without EDR, very bad security posture and all of that stuff. Environment size not that big, but the first thing that we usually do when we start an engagement, we deploy tools. So we do have some proprietary tools on the left-hand side, as you can see, data collection tools, point-in-time deep scan tools. These are tools that are developed by us. So basically, we have 3 tools that play. Fennec is the first one, which is basically widely deployed to all Windows machines. We have possibility of deploying it to Linux and Mac OS as well. But we widely deploy it because we want to have wide-scale threat hunting availability. So this tool basically collects very specific registry keys or registry keys, or for example, event logs. It will not collect everything, so very surgical in that sense. If we find a device of interest after we start investigating using that data, then we basically execute Fox, which is another tool that will collect the full kind of registry hive, the full event logs, MFT, USN journal, and all of that stuff. And then the last one is Arctic, which basically is just an Active Directory tool that collects all the objects within Active Directory, so users, computers, groups, group policy objects, and so on. If a customer doesn't have an EDR solution, we would deploy the EDR solution, so Microsoft Defender for Endpoint in this case, or Defender for Identity, for continuous monitoring. So basically from this point on, just to basically have continuous monitoring of any activity that is happening within the environment. The next thing, so since the customer told us that this was likely APT34. We as Microsoft don't track that as that. We have our own naming convention. So the taxonomy or the naming convention that we use is aligned with the theme of weather. So we got things like blizzards and tempests and sleets and sandstorms and things like that. The one that we were looking for specifically is Sandstorm. Falls into that family. And specifically APT34 is known as Hazel Sandstorm within Microsoft. So they are based out of Iran. It's the Ministry of Intelligence and Security. They're basically targeting anybody that's in the government sector or has ties to government, telecommunications, or IT, and targeting organizations within the Middle East. The way that they get in, at least what we kind of had at that time, was basically social engineering. That was kind of it. So we kind of found out a little bit about, okay, what is this APT34? Gain a little understanding of it, and then we started diving into the data after the data started pouring in from Fennec and all the other tools that we had deployed. So we'll start diving into the findings straight away. First thing that we found wasn't a difficult one: web shells. So the threat actor basically created this errors.aspx file, which you see on the bottom left-hand corner. I'm not sure if the pointer is working there. So that file was created and then used by the threat actor because the web shell only had capability of writing files to disk. So the threat actor used that web shell to drop two other files, well, one other file, which was this ghost.inc, and then modified this signoff.aspx file, which was a file already present on the system. So the ghost.inc file is at the bottom. You can see this, the signoff.aspx file is at the bottom, which basically says if you have a header with the xcheckme equal to ghost, then it will include that ghost.inc, which is the web shell. And that web shell had more capability in terms of, you know, command execution, file upload, and file download. So perfect. Wasn't a very big deal. Very easy find. Plus the customer already told us that they had that. This was found on both Web 01 and Web 02. Continue on. So after the threat actor modified the sign-off ASPX, used that ASPX file to drop additional files onto the system. So there's a lot of PowerShell scripts. There was the one that actually really stands out is the ngrok command, so the ng.ps1, which was basically a PowerShell script to download ngrok. And the other ones that stand out, I mean, yes, port scanners and all of that, but there was a scheduled task that was also being kind of created. We didn't see anything come out of that one. And then there was this kernel elevation of privilege vulnerability, so that was exploiting that part. We did not see any signs of that happening in the environment as well. ngrok, for those that don't know it, is a tool that basically creates a tunnel to your local host so you don't have to expose it out to the internet. It's got an agent, connects out to the ngrok edge IP addresses, and then basically allows you to kind of expose the server to the internet that way. The question that we had after this was, how was that first web shell, so the errors ASPX file, how did that end up on the system? We just saw file creation, that was it. Nothing else, nothing before it, no logins, nothing along those lines. So that was still a mystery. So we said, okay, fine, let's just leave it at that. Let's move on, let's see what else we have. And we started looking into that ngrok tunnel. So the ngrok tunnel was basically found only on SQL 01. It was created through Web 01 and Web 02 because they were executing those PowerShell commands that was downloading ngrok and then targeting various systems throughout the environment. The only system that this actually worked on was SQL 01. So only that one box was there because it had access to the internet. All the other boxes that they tried on didn't have any access. So after we saw that there was RDP connections to the SQL box from the ngrok tunnel. It's very easy to kind of identify that. So in the top right-hand corner, you see what the kind of the detection mechanism for that is, how you can figure that out. But basically, the lateral movement piece, once they got access to SQL 01, they used another privileged account to access not only web servers and another SQL box, but also two other domain controllers. So those are the ones that we are kind of interested in because we want to know what's going on your highest privileged assets. So looked at the domain controllers, found the two files, the two DLL files that were registered. They were created on the C Windows System 32. Soon after that, those files were created, we basically found that there was a notification package that was registered. And there was another file that was created, so we also look into like, the non-standard directories where you would kind of see things that are weird in terms of threat actors putting stuff in there. So in this C program data, Microsoft Update Service updates folder, there was a file called LPD. And we asked the customer, can you collect that file? Let's see what's inside it. The bottom left-hand corner is what we found. Fine, looked like base 64 encoded. I was like, okay, that's easy. Let's decode it. Let's see what's there. You get garbage. Okay, fine. In the meantime, we had the msupdate.dll and the passms.dll file handed over to our reverse engineers. They had a look at the file, and they came back with the analysis of that. And it turns out that it's a password filter, so basically a credential stealer. And how that works is, in this case, so if you got a domain with users and computers and all that stuff, when a user hits Control-Alt-Delete to change their password on their machine, the password is actually changed on the domain controller. So this is what was intercepting it. So that password change request was hitting the local security authority on the domain controller, and then the domain controller basically passes has to call these password filters to basically say, okay, is the password compliant with the complexity and all of that stuff? This is what was registered. So that password filter was registered by the threat actor. It was intercepting those passwords and then writing them into the LPD file. There was a format where they basically put the timestamp when the password was changed, the username and password, separated by pipes, encoded into base 64. There was a key, there was custom alphabet that was used, and then basically encoded into some sort of engineer's cipher. Yeah, that was used. After that, the algorithm was cracked, so the reverse engineer was able to crack the algorithm, found 8 entries in there. All the accounts were for non-privileged accounts, so basically just user accounts that were changing passwords on their machines. So after that, there is another file. So this passms file has the capability of calling the msupdate DLL file, and that is a C#-based DLL. But once invoked, what it basically does, so the msupdate DLL file had hard-coded UNC paths to both Web01 and Web02, and hard-coded credentials in it. So it's specifically written for the customer. And this is the way that they were basically shipping the files, so the LPD file from the domain controller to the web servers so that they could access it from the outside. So in this case, at the bottom, you can see that the threat actor was using the ngrok tunnel to connect to SQL01, basically connected then to DC01, DC02, dropped the 2 files, and then once the user started changing their passwords, this LPD file was created. Once the LPD file got created, it was basically shipped off using the msupdate DLL as icon02.jpg to the web servers, and then from outside the threat actor was able to access it and get the passwords. So how do you hunt for these kind of notification packages? I'm not going to go through this, but the logic is there. Basically, none of these DLL files were signed, so that's a very simple one to kind of do. If you're collecting DLL file signatures, you will basically be able to find this very easy to detect. So there's a KQL, because we use KQL in our hunts, KQL kind of logic behind that detection. So moving on, at this stage, the threat intelligence team informed us about a domain that was used by Hazel Sandstorm. I had to redact that domain because it's not publicly known, so cannot share that information, unfortunately. But okay, perfect. What do we do first? We looked through our data. So the Fennec data that we collected, we looked through that data, and we found that there was DNS events. specifically for invalid domain name, DNS events, which contained that specific domain. And one of the things, like when you decode so there is a kind of this binary data that you have. Once you decode that, you actually get to the, let's say clear text portion of it. So you can actually go and see what the domain is. This is what we found. And we found what looked like a workstation within the organization. In this case, I put it down as WKS, so workstation. Again, had to redact it there. But that was it. Cool. So we know that that workstation did something within the environment, right? Did some sort of DNS requests, very likely, because this was found on domain controllers. And the domain controllers were not compromised in that case, these ones. So that at least told us, okay, fine, let's go and look at this WKS machine. But we basically said, okay, let's not just focus on that one. Let's focus on all the other machines that are in the that have an EDR solution installed. So we started searching in the EDR because it's got 6 months. Why not go, full-blown 6 months? Let's try it with that. No results found in like 10 seconds. So, okay, experience shows that if you kind of search something for 6 months, probably not indexed and all that stuff, it will take a while. It's not going to happen within 10 seconds that you get no results. So we kind of switched the logic and started searching in like 2-week time slots to give it a little bit more room, and slowly going back in time. And then finally we found it, right? So what we found was that there was a Visual Basic script running on specifically that WKS machine that was reaching out to that domain. But the script also had, as you can see here, like this specific stuff here where it says CC and then the computer name and then the domain. That was specifically also found in the invalid domain name DNS events. So the script had also capability of Active Directory discovery, so it was kind of taking the users and computers out of it and a lot of other things. So, okay, that's good. We found kind of the source of that information, but what executed that VBS script? That was the question that we had. We want to know, how did that VBS script get executed? So we started looking into the EDR solution. Luckily, we had the parent-child relationships, and we found that it was this opcacta process, which is a process that is, well, it's a subcomponent of HPE operations agent, which is basically HP OpenView, or what used to be, I think, Micro Focus. So it's monitoring for the server. And specifically, this opcacta agent has the capability of running scripts. So hence why we see the VBS scripts, right? The temp script and then the abc003.vbs, which was reaching out to all of these, to this domain. So excellent, we got that. We then wondered, okay, what else did this opcacta kind of execute? Was there anything else that we've missed? We want to know about it. And we found that there was the EDR solutions file integrity monitoring component picked up the file mslogon.dll, which was being created by cscript. This, again, not something that you usually see on a domain controller. And then soon after that, we see the network provider with the same name being registered by the operations agent. So again, not something typical you see. We had a look into all the folders that we already know that the threat actor was using. So C users public was something that was heavily used by the threat actor. We found this ab123c.d file. So we asked the customer, can you go and collect that file? Let's see what happened, what's inside it. And we found the clear text users and passwords for privileged user accounts. So, okay, that obviously has something to do with it. The network provider and that file has something to do one with the other. So again, we sent off the file to the reverse engineer, have a look at it, analyze it, see what we get back. What we got back was that it's, again, another kind of credential stealer, but it's utilizing the API's np logon notify and np password change notify. In this case, so it's very similar to what we saw with the other one, but in this case, this is only on the local machine. So you have to be interactively doing the logon on the machine, whether it be through RDP or physically on the box. So every time a domain admin Control-Alt-Delete, logged onto the box, RDP to the box, we basically had the passwords fill that text file. There's a little explanation of how this works. So basically, when we want to enter credentials, the win logon process is that username password box that you see. Once you enter the credentials, it will go into this np notify, and then np notify will basically notify all the registered network providers on the system. So in this case, it was also notifying the malicious network provider, and that was outputting the file or the credentials to clear text credentials to the output file. So perfect, we found that. How do you hunt for that? Kind of the same logic. It was not signed, so the DLL fairly simple in terms of figuring out whether there's any suspicious DLLs on the file system. I will not go through the logic in here. It's basically for reference if you guys are going to, I think they're going to be published, right? All of that stuff, yeah. So you will have that. You will be able to copy and paste it and all of that stuff. Cool. So how did this all look like? Basically, you had the threat actor that was controlling this HPE operations manager, because that's the console for all the agents. And then it was using that to execute VBS scripts, first on the WKS machine, doing DNS requests and kind of Active Directory discovery. Then we saw that on DC01, it created and registered the network provider. This one, mslogon.dll, which writes the credentials to the file. So we thought, okay, this was obviously used throughout the environment by the threat actor. Maybe this is how the web shells got created on Web 01 and Web 02, and that's why, unfortunately, this is in a different color, because it's likely successful. Now, why do we say likely successful? Because these ones didn't have an EDR solution. So it was not covered by an EDR solution. We did not have the parent-child relationships and all that stuff to be able to say with certainty, yes, this is what was actually done on the box. So yes, it's an assumption. It's very likely because it was used, but it did have the HPE operations agent on it. So finally, we found how the errors.aspx got onto it. What we asked the customer afterwards was, okay, who's got control of the HPE operations agents? Like, who has control of that manager, the console? And they said, oh, it's our IT service provider. It's like, okay, that's a big deal, because IT service providers provide services to other customers, right? So if their HPE operations manager console is compromised, it's very likely that other customers are also compromised. And what we've seen here is basically the threat actor leveraging the trusted relationships technique within the initial access tactic of MITRE. So usually what you see is, for example, the threat actors using like valid credentials for your vendors and then coming into your environment. But in this case, they were using the HPE Operations Manager console to kind of control the agents and execute code on it. So this was a first for me, to be honest. So I haven't seen this technique very often, like used very often. And basically, now that we know kind of how all of these things happen, right? How does this look like in a timeline? So just kind of recapping everything. So starting off on day one, that VBS script was executed on WKS. Then we see after 8 days, DC01 registering that network provider. After that, we got the file basically being created a day after, and then the threat actor using those clear text credentials to execute, basically gather credentials to be able to do things afterwards, because they had high privileged account credentials to the environment now. Day 24, both of these web servers, they get a web shell. The first one, errors.aspx, created by, again, very likely the operations agent. On day 28, only on web 02, they started modifying they modified the sign-off ASPX file, created the ghost.inc, which was the web shell that had more capabilities, and basically dropped multiple binaries through it, so they had persistence there. And then on day 40, started executing WMI commands to get the ngrok tunnel on the SQL box, which they finally got on day 40, same day, and started doing lateral movement, RDP connections, and all that to the other boxes. On DC01 and DC02, the MS update and pass.ms DLL files were again registered as notification packages. And then on day 100, they get notified from their SOC, hey, there is some malicious traffic going on from this SQL box. So it took them from day 40, when the ngrok tunnel was established for the first time, to day 100, and it took them 60 days or 2 months to actually notice this. Not probably the best SOC out there, but anyway, they got notified, which is good, right? After that, obviously they took the server down, so the threat actor had no options but to kind of go back to the web 02 and kind of fall back onto the web shells again. And then we were finally engaged on day 123. So all of this, it took them 100 days. They were in there for 100 days. When they first got notified by their SOC, there's something going on. What kind of key findings and recommendations did we give to the customer? Again, this is not the full list, of course, but kind of just the key ones. First of all, EDR solution wasn't deployed fully out there. It was just not deployed to web 01, web 02 in this case, but it was missing on other servers which were not part of the attack chain. So make sure that you have EDR on all your machines. Make sure you know what you're protecting. You know your assets and all that stuff. In terms of unrestricted internet access, so as mentioned, the PowerShell script that was downloading and executing ngrok was executed towards multiple other machines. It only worked on SQL 01. So one machine is enough. They basically had to go and review their filtering strategy, make sure that, block by default, and then allow only business justified traffic. So that's the second one. Third one, we actually found out that the HP operations agents were unnecessary on the boxes. They were not needed there anymore. So it actually turned out that only like 20 boxes had access, had the actual operations agent on it. All the other boxes didn't. Now, the IT service provider used that agent to kind of collect information on CPU, memory, disk, and all of that stuff to be able to charge the customer and kind of foresee whether they need to kind of add additional disk space, memory, and all of that stuff. But it was only for 20 devices, which, again, it didn't need to be there. So get rid of the software one if you don't need it to basically reduce that attack surface. Unsecured privileged access. So we've seen that the threat actor was using high privileged accounts on a whole bunch of systems. So web servers that are exposed to the internet, they're not treated as what we call tier 0 machines or your highest value assets. And basically what we've recommended to the customer, this is now called the enterprise access model. It used to be called the tiering model. So for the on-prem side of things, if you don't have like a hybrid connection, you are basically kind of stuck with implementing the tiering model, basically making sure that all your highest value assets in terms of domain controllers, anything that has to do with identity and authentication is treated as tier 0, and you can only log into those systems with like privileged access workstations. It is all locked down. You cannot use your domain admin credentials on any other system but those within tier 0. And you cannot, of course, log into a tier 0 asset from like a workstation that is being used by somebody, in finance department or whatever. So that's the fourth one. And the fifth one is, as we've seen, it took the SOC 60 days to notice this. So obviously they were not kind of monitoring the alerts properly, and they had no proper threat hunting. So this is something that you want to have in the company as well. In terms of the lessons learned for incident responders, so what we kind of get out of that, but basically some of this stuff we already do, some of the stuff we noticed during the engagement. First of all, trust but verify. So this is something we apply on every single engagement. Thank you, Mr. Customer, for giving us all the indicators and kind of providing us with the guidance of what you already investigated, but we're going to be verifying that. So if we went with the assumption, as the customer said, yep, the initial access method were the web shells, we could have said, yep, okay, we found the web shells, that's it, fine, we don't care about it. You know, trust but verify, make sure that you're pushing your boundaries. The other piece is threat intel is crucial. So in this case, threat intel played an important part because of that domain that they gave us for us to be able to go back and look at, you know, look at the data to see if there was anything referencing that domain. So work with your threat intel team, make sure, you know, they know their stuff. It can very much kind of steer the investigation in the right direction and make you more effective. Knowing your tools. So that is something that, again, if you do an incident response, if you are not familiar with a specific tool, you kind of have to learn on the spot, but then use your kind of past experience again. What we did here was, again, use our past experience. It's like, yeah, 6 months worth of data to have, you know, to search through it within like 10 seconds and give us results doesn't work that way. So that's why we, you know, question that, try to use your experience from the past. And then the last one is thinking outside the box. The red teams out there, the threat actors, you know, everybody is getting, you know, thinking outside the box, pushing themselves harder, trying harder, being creative, and all of that stuff. We as incident responders should be doing the same thing. So don't set boundaries for yourself. Have the same approach, right? Be creative. This is ultimately what kind of was the game changer here in this case, because when you're dealing with a nation state, they can be very creative. You need to be able to kind of handle that as well. So you need to be creative in that sense. For the customer, that was not all. There was another nation state in there that we found. And they were in there for 3 years. They didn't care about that, to be honest. They didn't care about that. So they cared about the incident that I was talking about. This I will not cover here because of time and all of that. So it's a talk for another time. That's it. Thank you so much. Questions?
Thank you, Vladimir. Do we have any questions? Okay.
Yeah. Do you know how the HP operations agent was initially compromised, and if there were any other customers that were affected with the same issue?
Unfortunately, no, because it is another customer that we did not engage with. So we could not engage with that customer. We could not tell the customer, hey, you know, there's something fishy going on. What we did with the customer that we were engaged with, we told them, you have to go and, I mean, you should go and speak to your vendor and tell them they have an issue. We, as in this case, as Microsoft IR, we could not go to that specific customer because we were not engaged with them.
You will get your own mic.
Good joke. Thanks. One question. So you mentioned that they were quite for a long time inside the company. So what was their game? So were there initial access brokers waiting to sell the access? Were they actually exfiltrating data? Did they start maybe some kind of ransomware? You know, what were they doing for 123 days or whatever?
So in terms of the threat actor being there, since it's a nation state coming from Iran, it's targeting Middle Eastern countries. Espionage would be one of the things. So basically just kind of collecting data. They would not be deploying ransomware. It was like not their thing. And did we find exfiltration? No. The reason being is there was no data by the customer that would actually give, they couldn't provide us with the data that we would go look and prove that there was exfiltration.
Okay.
So did it likely occur? Yes. Do we have evidence? No.
But do you have a strong feeling that this was very targeted, or?
Oh yeah, yeah. Targeted 100%.
I mean, I get that national state actors would, penetrate an IT provider because that gives them a wide.
Correct.
But then they choose and pick which one they actually compromise. So obviously, this client was a good target for them for some reason.
Yes, it was a good target for them. Unfortunately, I cannot even mention the sector the target is in. But yes, it was definitely a good target for them to go after. And like I said, they would not deploy ransomware. It's basically espionage and kind of collecting information, collecting intel. That was their main goal.
Okay. And maybe if you have time, so the cleanup was successful after that, or for the client?
The okay. Yeah, very good question. Because the customer, so what we usually do in this, in such engagements is we would basically reinstall all the main controllers. We start from scratch in terms of the main controllers, right? You want to have a clean server, clean system to start off with, and that was basically it. In this case, the customer was so they had a dependency on services because the domain control was hard-coded into those services, and they couldn't shut it down. They could not replace it in time, so they asked us, can you give us kind of just, how do we clean this stuff up? We'll do the, the full kind of reinstall later on. Not the best, not the ideal, but again, it's the customer's decision, right? It's a risk-based decision for them.
Thanks.
Sure. I think it took around 8 to 10 days, something like that. I don't recall, but it's 8 to 10 days. So usually our engagements are between 1 and 2 weeks. That's kind of the usual stuff. We move very quickly because of the tooling. Like I said, the Fennec tool that we have, that is something that we deploy widely into the environment. So we collect information, then we can do wide-scale hunting across the environment. So yeah, fairly quick.
Hi. So this was a Sandstorm threat actor.
Yep.
So there have been some geopolitical things going on. So how would you react if this was a Blizzard threat actor in the future engagements?
So I've done. Yeah.
I don't know if you understand what I'm referring to, because there have been some initiatives not to investigate Blizzard threat actors anymore. So is that affecting how DART will investigate in the future? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I don't think we have any kind of blocking points for investigating Blizzard activity. So I've done Blizzard activity before, like investigated Blizzard before, from Midnight Blizzard. I don't recall the other threat group there that I did, but it would. How does it differ? I would say the Blizzards are maybe more kind of blending into the environment than these guys, at least from my experience that I have, well, for the engagement that I've done with them. But yeah, I think with Blizzards, it's more difficult, especially Midnight Blizzard. That is a difficult one to kind of deal with. Does that answer the question, or any follow-ups?
I was asking because the new administration from United States.
Oh, because of that?
Yeah, because of that. Is that going?
I don't think that will change.
It won't change. Okay.
I don't think it will change.
I hope it doesn't. Thank you.
Yeah.
Кой да го рука?
Hi. Just a question, since you're working with Dart. We've recently seen that if the APTs don't get caught in a typical fashion, they usually slip up in like one step, and that gets them caught. So, for example, in the Volexity had an article last year about the Wi-Fi neighboring attacks, where basically they were in 3 different environments for several years, and then at the final stages they slipped up by running, you know, reg save SAM. And I noticed that the SOC wasn't actually alerted in this incident until the ngrok tunnel came up, right?
Yes.
So how often is it that you see as an incident responder that advanced groups like this slip up only at one step, where basically if they change that to something like a custom C2, they would essentially evade likely any detection?
Okay, if we're talking about like really advanced groups, it's very rare that they slip up. So this was, I think, just a coincidence for the customer because they did not have a very good SOC, like not good detections, EDR deployment. They were not looking at the alerts properly. And I do recall kind of the alerts, there was just too many alerts to look at. There was no tuning or anything like that. So if a threat actor stumbles upon an environment like that, then you could basically use anything. You don't have to kind of go and masquerade and kind of hide between different things and whatever the customer has in their environment. But as you were talking about the blizzards, right? Those guys are very difficult to find because they do blend into the environment a lot. I did a threat actor. It was not a nation state, but it was an advanced threat actor where they blended in with the company's AV solution that they had at the time, and it took us a few days to find the spiciness. So, yeah, I would say it just depends on the customer's kind of security, maturity of their security, of their SOC, and the capabilities that they have.
Thank you.
Yep, all the way at the back.
We have
2
time
minutes.
for only one question.
I watched your map about techniques and the timeline. So do you think that there were 2 different threat actors operating or acting in the same moment? Because I think that in the first 14 days, the threat actor was using a couple of techniques, and then there was like a stop, sort of break of 10, 20 days,
Correct.
and then started again. And it made me remember about 2 different threat actors, and somehow you confirmed that they were, this actor was from Iran. So do you consider that maybe there were 2 different teams operating in the same time, or anyway, like doing the end-off of activities? Like the first part was ended by a threat, and then was like just ended up the second one.
To another one. Yep, I get the question. So in this case, this was all done by one threat actor. That's it. We are sure of that because of the TTPs and the knowledge that we have around that threat actor, so specifically Hazel Sandstorm. Yes, there was another threat actor in there acting at the same time, so they were overlapping, but the TTPs were different for that one. And in this case, it was not handed off to like from one threat actor to another threat actor. You would see typically that in like financially motivated groups or threat actors where you have initial access brokers, and then they would have, sell that off, and then some other threat actor will pick it up and then come into the environment, do whatever they're supposed to do, and then a third threat actor would do the final kind of stages of it. This is not the case with this one. So even though that there was like differences in time, these guys are very patient, right? And the reason they switched from HPE operations agent to web shells to ngrok, and then you see when the ngrok tunnel got smacked by the customer, they switched back to the web shells. So they had multiple methods of kind of entering the environment. maybe the customer, sorry, the vendor noticed that their operations manager was also compromised, so they lost access to that. They had access to the web shell, the ngrok tunnel, lost access to the ngrok tunnel, went back to web shells. But it's all the same threat actor.
Thank you, Vladimir. Please applause. Louder, louder.